When people talk about a perfect marriage, they often focus on the happy photos, the smiling kids, and the laughter shared over dinner. That was exactly how everyone saw us, me and Elena. 9 years together, 2 beautiful daughters, a cozy house in the suburbs. We looked like the picture-perfect family. And for a long time I believed it too. Sure, we had our problems like anyone else. Arguments over finances, the stress of raising kids, the occasional cold shoulder when one of us had a bad day. But that was normal, right? Nothing to worry about. Elena had always been the kind of woman who kept things close to her chest. She wasn't overly emotional or dramatic. She handled things quietly, calmly. When she was upset, I usually found out days later when it finally came up in conversation. I loved that about her, how steady she seemed. I thought it meant we were solid. I thought it meant we could handle anything. Lately, though, something felt off. She was distant, cold even. Conversations felt like formalities. She barely looked me in the eye at dinner. I noticed her scrolling on her phone more, spending time in the other room instead of watching TV with me after the kids went to bed. I asked her if something was wrong, but she always brushed it off. Just tired, she'd say. Work's been crazy. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe this was just a rough patch we'd eventually laugh about. I thought we had time to fix things. I thought we were strong enough. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that Elena wasn't just tired. She was done. The life we had built, the one I thought we were both holding on to, she was already letting it go. And I was the last person to notice. The perfect illusion was about to shatter. It was a Thursday evening, one of those ordinary nights that doesn't stand out until everything goes wrong. I had just finished cleaning up after dinner while the kids were upstairs getting ready for bed. The house was quiet except for the muffled sound of cartoons coming from their room. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my emails when my phone buzzed. I didn't think much of it. Elena wasn't the type to text unless it was something casual, a reminder to pick up groceries or a quick, good night, if she was out late with friends. But this text, this one hit me like a punch to the gut. I'm leaving. I'm in love with someone else. I've already packed. At first I thought it had to be a joke. Maybe she sent it by mistake, a weird prank or a message meant for someone else. My heart started pounding in my chest. I stared at the screen for what felt like minutes, my brain refusing to process the words. This couldn't be real. I called her immediately. No answer. I called again. Nothing. I was pacing the living room, my breath shallow, trying to convince myself there had to be some logical explanation. Maybe we had a fight I'd forgotten about. Maybe this was her way of getting back at me for something. But then I went upstairs. I checked the bedroom and my heart dropped. Half the closet was empty. Her suitcase was gone. The drawers where she kept her jewelry, her makeup, all cleared out. She had left. She had really left. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my hands shaking, my mind racing with a million questions I couldn't answer. Why hadn't I seen this coming? How could she leave so easily, so suddenly? But the truth was, it wasn't sudden at all. She had been planning this. I just hadn't noticed. And the worst part? This was only the beginning. The next morning, I woke up hoping it had all been a bad dream. I barely slept, just stared at the ceiling replaying the last few months, searching for the signs I'd missed. I kept thinking there had to be some mistake. She would come back. We'd talk this through. We'd fix it. But reality hit hard. I went to the bank that day to handle some routine business, something about adjusting our mortgage payments. I was still in a fog, just going through the motions. But when I checked the account balance, my heart stopped. 0. She had drained everything. Every penny we had saved over the years, the emergency fund, the vacation savings, the money we set aside for the kids' future. It was all gone. I froze, my stomach twisting into knots. I must have refreshed the page 5 times, hoping it was some kind of glitch. But it wasn't. She had taken it all. I tried calling her again. No answer. I sent her a text. Where's the money, Elena? What the hell is going on? Hours passed with no response. When her name finally popped up on my screen, my chest tightened. I opened the message, bracing myself for an apology, some kind of explanation. But instead all I got was this. I'm sorry, but I'm done. I can't keep pretending this marriage works. I need more. I found someone who sees me. I'm taking the kids. Don't try to stop me. My heart shattered. Not just because she was leaving me, but because she had already decided I wasn't worth fighting for. I sat there, staring at the message, my hands shaking with anger. How could she do this? How could she walk away from everything we built, from me, from our family, as if it meant nothing? But the anger quickly turned into something darker. She hadn't just left me. She had planned this. She had taken everything. And now she was threatening to take my kids too. This wasn't heartbreak. This was war. In the days that followed, the shock wore off, leaving something colder and sharper in its place. Anger. It burned in my chest every time I thought about Elena walking away with everything. My savings, my kids, my dignity. She had played me. I kept asking myself how I could have been so blind. How long had this been going on? How long had she been planning to leave while I was busy believing we were just in a rough patch? But here's the thing about betrayal. Once you've hit rock bottom, there's only one way left to go. And I wasn't about to stay down. What Elena didn't know was that I had seen this coming. Maybe not the affair, but something. She had been pulling away for months. The late nights, the vague excuses, the way she barely looked at me anymore. My gut had been screaming that something was off. So I made a decision, one I didn't even fully understand at the time. I started moving my money. Little by little, I funneled our savings into a separate account. Something in me knew I had to protect myself just in case. When Elena realized what I'd done, the gloves came off. I'll never forget the phone call. For the first time since she left, she actually picked up. Her voice was cold, distant, like she was talking to a stranger. So you think you're going to get away with this? I could barely process the words. Get away with what? Protecting myself? Surviving? I stayed calm, but my hands were shaking. You left me, Elena. You took the kids, you drained the accounts. I'm not the one who needs to explain anything. But she wasn't interested in explanations. Her voice cracked with anger. I'm taking you to court. I'll get what I'm owed. You think you can hide the money from me? I'll get half of everything, and the kids too. Half of everything. As if this was some business deal. As if our entire marriage boiled down to what she thought she was owed. I hung up that night with a realization that hit me harder than anything else. This wasn't about love or heartbreak. This wasn't even about the kids. It was about control. And I wasn't going to let her have it. I called my lawyer the next morning. She wanted a fight, I was ready. But I had no idea just how far she was willing to go, or how much I was about to lose before this was over. The first time I saw the official letter from her lawyer, my stomach dropped. It wasn't just a notice of divorce, it was a declaration of war. Elena wanted half of everything, including my separate account. She claimed I'd been deceitful by moving the money, painting herself as the victim of my supposed betrayal. The same woman who had packed her bags and left me for another man was now demanding what she thought was rightfully hers. And it didn't stop there. She wasn't just after the money. She wanted the kids. The letter accused me of being an unfit father, someone who was too busy with work to care for his own children. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I was the one who had been there for every doctor's appointment, every bedtime story, every scraped knee. I had built my entire life around being a present father. And now she was trying to erase all of that with a few lines of legal jargon. I called my lawyer immediately. He told me to stay calm, but how could I? She wasn't just trying to take my money, she was trying to take my entire life. We spent the next few weeks gathering evidence. I kept everything: text messages, emails, financial records. I documented the nights she didn't come home, the days she barely spoke to me, the hours I spent alone with the kids while she was working late. The more I dug, the more I realized how long this had been going on. But it wasn't just about proving my innocence. It was about showing the court who she really was. She wasn't a victim. She was someone who had planned this, who had built a life with another man while pretending to be my wife. The worst part wasn't the legal battle, it was the silence from my kids. I could barely sleep at night, wondering what she was telling them. Was she turning them against me? Would they believe her lies? I kept telling myself that the truth would come out, that the court would see who she really was. But the deeper we got into this fight, the more I realized something terrifying. The truth wasn't always enough. And if I wanted to win this, I would have to be ready to expose every dark secret she thought she could keep hidden. By the time the court date arrived, I felt like I'd aged 10 years. The stress, the sleepless nights, the endless meetings with my lawyer, it all weighed on me. But I was ready. Or at least I thought I was. Elena walked into the courtroom with the same cold confidence she'd had since the day she left. Her lawyer wasted no time painting me as the villain, a deceitful husband who had been hiding assets to cheat her out of what she deserved. They made me sound like some kind of master manipulator. I sat there, biting my tongue, trying to keep my composure. But the worst part wasn't the accusations. It was hearing her talk about me as if I had never mattered. As if I hadn't spent 9 years loving her, building a life together. She sat there calmly, talking about me like I was just another obstacle in her way. When the custody hearing began, my heart pounded harder than it ever had before. My lawyer presented my side, the time I spent with the kids, the sacrifices I made to be there for them. But Elena didn't back down. She claimed I was unstable, emotionally manipulative, and incapable of providing a stable home. She had no proof, but she didn't need it. The words alone were enough to sting. But what she didn't know, what no one knew, was that I had been holding on to something she never saw coming. I had kept everything. Every text, every email, every bank transfer. And in those records was the truth. She wasn't just having an affair. She had been funneling our money into joint accounts with Sebastian for months. When my lawyer presented the evidence, the room went silent. I could see the color drain from Elena's face. The judge flipped through the documents, his expression growing darker with every page. She had accused me of hiding money, but it was her all along. She had been building a new life with someone else while I was busy holding our family together. The courtroom felt electric. I could barely breathe as my lawyer finished presenting the evidence. Elena's lawyer tried to backpedal, but it was too late. The truth was out. But then, just when I thought I had won, Elena's team threw a final punch. They accused me of manipulating the kids, saying I had been poisoning them against their mother. It hit me harder than anything else. I had never spoken a bad word about her to our children. I had spent every sleepless night trying to shield them from this mess. I sat there, staring at the judge, wondering if this was how it would end, with her lies outweighing my truth. But the judge wasn't buying it. He had seen enough. And when he finally spoke, I realized this fight wasn't just about money or custody. It was about who we really were when the masks came off. And in that moment, the truth was finally on my side. When the judge finally announced his decision, it felt like time slowed down. I could barely breathe as the words left his mouth. Based on the evidence presented, it is clear that Mrs. Martinez acted in bad faith regarding financial disclosure and has engaged in deceptive practices. Furthermore, the claims against Mr. Martinez regarding his fitness as a caregiver lack sufficient evidence. Therefore, primary custody of the children will be awarded to Mr. Martinez. I exhaled a breath I didn't even realize I was holding. The weight of those words hit me harder than I expected. I had won. But the victory felt hollow. Elena sat across the room, staring at the floor. For the first time since this nightmare began, she wasn't angry. She wasn't smug. She looked broken. Part of me thought I'd feel satisfied seeing her like that, after everything she'd put me through. But I didn't. All I saw was the woman I once loved, completely undone by her own choices. The financial ruling came next. The judge denied her claims to my separate account, citing clear evidence that she had diverted marital funds long before the separation. In the end, she walked away with a fraction of what she expected. No joint savings, no assets from my personal account. She had gambled everything and lost. But the real win was the kids. I got to keep my family. I got to keep my home. Elena was awarded visitation, but the judge made it clear, she had crossed too many lines to be trusted with full custody. As we left the courtroom, she approached me. For the first time in months, she looked like the woman I once knew. I never thought it would end like this, she whispered. Her voice cracked, and for a second, I saw the regret in her eyes. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. What was there to say? She had made her choice. I had made mine. And now we had to live with the consequences. Winning the battle didn't feel like winning. I had my kids, my home, my finances, but I had lost something too. The person I once trusted more than anyone had become a stranger. And no courtroom victory could change that. As I walked away holding my kids' hands, I realized something. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something new. And this time I would be ready. The courtroom battle was over, but the real fight had just begun. Winning the case didn't magically fix everything. I walked out with primary custody of the kids, my finances intact, and a sense of justice, but also with scars no one could see. The first few weeks after the ruling were the hardest. The kids were confused, hurt, and full of questions I wasn't ready to answer. Why doesn't mommy live with us anymore? Did I do something wrong? Every time they asked, it felt like another knife twisting in my chest. I tried to be strong for them, but the truth is I was still broken too. Elena was distant during her visits, almost like she was going through the motions. I wanted to hate her, to hold on to the anger, but it was exhausting. Bitterness was a heavy weight and I was tired of carrying it. I had to rebuild our lives from the ground up. Mornings were chaotic, getting the kids ready for school while juggling work. Evenings were filled with homework, dinner, and trying to keep my own emotions in check. I barely slept. Some nights I'd sit in the dark, staring at old family photos, wondering how we got here. But slowly, something changed. I realized that surviving wasn't enough. I wanted more. I wanted to be happy again, not just for me but for my kids. I started therapy, something I never thought I'd need. Talking about the pain, the betrayal, and the loss helped more than I expected. I learned that grief isn't just for death, it's for the life you thought you'd have. The kids started to adjust too. We found new routines. Movie nights on Fridays, pancakes on Sunday mornings. We laughed more. We cried when we needed to. And little by little the house stopped feeling so empty. Elena tried to reach out once or twice. Not to apologize, not really. More like she wanted to convince herself that we could still be something. Friends maybe. But I couldn't give her that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Healing isn't a straight line. Some days I still feel the sting of what happened. But I'm learning that moving on doesn't mean forgetting. It means accepting that some chapters end so better ones can begin. And this was my beginning. A few months had passed since the court battle. Life had started to find some semblance of normalcy, or at least as close to normal as I could get. The kids were happier and so was I, at least on the outside. I'd learned how to juggle work, the kids' school activities, and everything else that came with single parenthood. There were still moments when I'd look around and think about the life Elena and I had once dreamed of. But those thoughts were becoming fewer and farther between. One evening, I sat in the living room after the kids were tucked into bed, sipping on a cold beer. The house was quiet, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel completely on edge. I'd been thinking about what came next. What did my future look like without Elena in it? I'd spent so much time trying to fix what was broken that I hadn't even considered the possibility of something new. That's when the idea hit me, maybe it was time to start living for myself again. It wasn't going to be easy, but the thought of staying stuck in the past forever was worse than taking a chance on something different. I began small. I took a cooking class on a whim, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the time for. I started reading books that weren't about how to be a better husband or father, but just stories that made me think, that made me feel something. I reconnected with old friends, people I had lost touch with during the chaos of my marriage. Slowly, I began to rediscover parts of myself that had been buried under years of compromise and responsibility. Then one day I met someone. Her name was Claire. We crossed paths at a local cafe, both reaching for the same book on the shelf. We laughed at the coincidence and exchanged a few words. The conversation was easy, light, something I hadn't experienced in a long time. There was no pressure, no expectations. Just two people talking. I didn't think much of it at first, but we kept running into each other. She had a warmth about her that I hadn't realized I'd been craving. We started meeting for coffee, and slowly I let myself imagine the possibility of something new. But it wasn't about rushing into a relationship. It was about rediscovering what it meant to be me again, to take things one step at a time. Claire was patient, understanding. She didn't rush me, didn't try to fix me. She simply allowed me to be who I was, scars and all. I still had moments of doubt, moments when the weight of the past threatened to pull me under. But with Claire, I began to see that I could have a future. A future that wasn't defined by betrayal or pain, but by the possibility of happiness, of growth, and maybe, just maybe, love again. As I sat with her one evening watching the sun set over the horizon, I realized that life, my life, was far from over. It was just beginning. With Claire, life felt different. Not in the way it had with Elena. There was no illusion of a perfect future, no promises made in a whirlwind of excitement. It was steady, grounded, and surprisingly comfortable. Every day I felt more at ease with who I was becoming, and more importantly, I was beginning to accept the journey I had taken to get here. The kids were starting to open up more about their feelings too. We were all in a fragile space, still healing, but we were healing together. I spent weekends with them, going on bike rides, watching movies, and having long talks about their school life and friends. I'd always been their father, but now I was truly becoming their safe place, their constant. And I realized that being a parent wasn't about perfection, it was about presence. I may not have had all the answers, but I was there. That was enough. Claire and I continued to grow closer, but the foundation of our connection wasn't built on shared trauma. It was built on mutual respect, understanding, and the simple act of enjoying each other's company. Our dates were quiet. Dinner in a small bistro, walks around the lake, and sometimes just sitting together talking about life, our hopes, and even our fears. Claire was patient. She never pushed me for more than I was ready to give, and that was exactly what I needed. I remember one evening as we were walking through the park, the kids had just run ahead to the playground, and Claire asked me what my biggest fear was now. I paused, looking at the sunset, the colors reflecting off the calm waters. For the first time in a long time, I had an answer. "I'm afraid of losing myself again," I said, my voice quieter than usual. I spent so many years trying to be the perfect husband, father, provider, that I lost sight of who I was. Who I wanted to be. I guess I'm afraid of falling back into old patterns, of giving everything and not having anything left for myself. Claire stopped walking and turned to face me. "You're not alone in this anymore," she said softly. "You don't have to lose yourself. You can be who you are, who you're meant to be." Her words lingered in the air, and for the first time in a while, I let myself believe it. The future was no longer defined by the pain of the past. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't clear, but it was mine. And that was enough. In the months that followed, I found myself starting new projects, diving into old hobbies, and even considering going back to school. The world was wide open again. I had my kids, my job, and a life to rebuild. A life that could be defined by my choices and the new family I was creating. It wasn't about revenge or holding on to bitterness or even proving anything. It was about taking ownership of the life I had left and making something good of it. Claire became a part of that, but she wasn't a replacement for Elena. She was a new chapter. A new experience. And I didn't know where that path would lead, but I was excited to walk it, one step at a time. I had learned the hard way that control was an illusion, and sometimes, the best thing you could do was let go and trust that life would unfold as it was meant to. My new life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And it was a good one.